Hey folks, Malforian here, and today we're going to be covering the latest dev diary by Millennia, which is Ages Part 1. We got the first part of the economy dev diary last time. The second part of that is coming in the new year, and this is going to be our first look at how the age system works, which is a pretty integral part of this game. It's one of the things I think differentiates it quite a bit from other 4X games. What we're basically going to be covering is what ages are, historical ages, some of the non-historical ages, and then also basically how they work in general in the game. And then obviously there's going to be at least a part 2, probably a part 3, probably going through some more of the ahistorical ages, and then obviously some more stuff on how they work and things like that. But today we're just going to brief overview, and we're just going to jump straight into it. So as they say here, the core of Millennia is to explore each era of human history and let the player toy around with what they might have done if they were there and basically a god, I guess, kind of controlling all of human evolution and what happened in history, kind of roughly what the game is playing out as. And then people also get excited about what if scenarios. I think a lot of players who play 4X games, you know, if you play Hoi 4, that's massive around like AltHistory is what happened if Germany won, what happened if England was communist or something like that. I think having these like AltHistory things is a cool thing to focus on for the game, as we've discussed before, because it is a area of history that I think pretty much never gets boring, because you can just always think of what would happen if this happened, if this war finished differently, if this person hadn't died, etc., etc. You know, there's just so much cool stuff you could tell. Like, I think having fully historical games is cool, but I think having these kind of games where different histories can play out, different things can play out, brings a lot of replayability to a game. So it is cool that they are focusing on that as one of the core pillars of the game. So to do that, Millennia features a wide range of historical and alt-history ages that create a sandbox for history where you can just tell your own story. From there, you can explore ages that involve what if Rome never fell, what if steam power was viable, or what if AI became sentient and took over the world, as if that would ever happen. I mean, what are they talking about? But as we've seen from when the game got announced anyway, Steam Power 1 was one of the ones that they kind of teased very early in the game's announcement. And it is one of the things that got me hooked into this game, was just seeing like, oh cool, you're going to be able to play that steampunk era. And what if steam power was basically never surpassed by something else? Well, not never surpassed, but what if steam power lasted for longer than it did and didn't get like overtaken by something else, by the combustion engines? And they have picked out a bunch for this first launch of the game. So they put these together. They had a whiteboard scribbling down the most common and interesting what if scenarios they could think of, and they basically picked the most interesting ones that they wanted to put in initially. I'm sure if the game is successful and they have DLC, either small or large, we'll get more and more of these ages, because I guess they can basically design an age and then just slot it into the system as it is. That's the cool thing about this kind of like modular age system, because in the future they could just pick new ones and kind of slot them in, and it isn't like rebuilding the entire game. As they will discuss going down here, they can kind of mix and match the ages in certain places, and it still plays out kind of sensibly anyway. So ages broadly, the timeline of Millennia is in 10 distinct ages. Each age houses a handful of texts that unlock units, buildings, improvements, and more. Unlocking each age will both progress you through history and potentially expose you to these what-if alternate history timelines. The historical ages have technologies you will realize, and the alternative ages have some unique text to that age. The what-if steam power age has floating airships, steampunk machines, and more, just to give you a taste. And as you can see in the screenshot, you've got the airships here. I think you've got some larger ironclads, maybe. They look kind of like historical ironclads, but I imagine they're a little bit bigger. And then you've got these weird things up here. I'm not sure if they're from the Age of Steam or there is an Age of Ether. Maybe they're from that, because the things you get do carry on past the age you're in. You can kind of see from here anyway, you know, these massive airships, they are definitely not historical. Obviously, historically, there were massive airships, but not to the scale you will see in this game anyway. So just kind of showing off exactly how that's going to look on the map, well, at least at the moment. In order to progress from one age to another, you'll have to research a certain minimum number of texts from your current age and meet an additional requirement for the next age you have. And then you'll research the age that you want to advance into, because as they're going to cover here, you can basically split. You can go from one historical age to another historical age, or you can decide to split into a different age, into one of these non-historical, and then you join back into the historical one afterwards. Or there are even these crisis ages where you might be trying to do a normal historical age, like the Age of Iron or something, but something weird happens and you go into like the Age of Disease, whatever it's called. There's like a disease one, and then there's like the Age of Blood, where if there's loads of wars going on, it like calls down corn or something, and the whole world just goes crazy. I don't think corn comes, but you know what I mean? These different ages that you might not want to go into, but the game kind of ends up pushing you into them. due to what's happening in the world. You do have these like minimum requirements for tech, but then there are these other requirements that you need to hit to also move into the next age, so it kind of spices it up a little bit anyway. Other players can see your progress on any age advanced research you start and are alerted to whichever age research is closest to being completed. This will give you a chance to see what someone else is doing and race ahead to beat them to the age you prefer. So you do actually get to see that, which is interesting. I'd never thought about that, to be honest, but yeah, you actually get to see, and as you can see here, so this guy is playing as Nanying, and Age of Iron is going to be the next, and he is in Age of Bronze. So yeah, I guess if you're like, yeah, Age of Iron sounds fine, you don't have to kind of concentrate and try like rush to do that first, because you know, at the moment anyway, the next civilization is going to pick that, whoever is in the lead. But if you didn't want to be Age of Iron, if you wanted to go into one of these weird ones, you'd have to kind of catch up and get ahead of them and pick the one you wanted, because these ages affect everyone. It isn't just your civilization. You aren't going in like separate ages from everyone else. This affects the whole map. So that is going to make for interesting campaigns where you're not in control of what's coming next potentially, and it's going to push you into these ways you didn't necessarily want to get into. Maybe you don't want to go into the Age of Steam, but another one of these AI empires or multiplayer empires is going to choose that, and you're kind of stuck into it. You're kind of like pushed into it, and you're going to have to kind of do the best you can in that age and see how well you can survive in it. So there you go. So you have a little bit of control over it, but if someone else is way ahead of you, they're going to be making the choices and kind of seeing where it plays out. So by progressing in a non-mainline age, the non-historical ones, you diverge your game away from the historical known timeline and into alt history scenarios. They've chosen cutoff points in the timeline to break up the ages that work both historically and are suited to alt history. For example, if you choose to go through the age of what if Rome never fell, it picks up right about when Rome was in decline, and an age like what if steam power was viable is right at home in the Victorian period. Due to all the permutations, every game is going to play out differently because of how these ages link together. So yeah, you can't go into like the Age of Steam after the Age of Bronze, like it just wouldn't make sense. Even as an alt history, it's still got to fit into like the evolution of man. You can't just have them crazy all over the place. It is kind of semi-structured, and as I was saying before about DLC, they can very easily just slot in extra alt history ones or even normal history ones, maybe make it 12 ages long instead of 10 and things like that. So yeah, it seems like a very flexible system, but one that is kind of semi-rigid, so it doesn't get totally bananas really, really early on in the game. These alternate history ages take the place of historical ages, and that means you will sometimes miss out on something important from the main timeline in order to get something else unique for your alt history age. This variation leads to some wild games, and the system accounts for that by requiring you to return to the next historical age after adventuring into an alternate history branch. That way you're always in a known position when they present the next what if question, and we know you'll have the tools to rise to whatever challenge comes next. So again, that's why they've done this kind of semi-structured way, because I think if they always allowed you to pick whatever ages, you know, just go fully alt history through the whole game, they'd have to make so many units. They'd have to think, okay, well, the Victorian age, there's a lot of like powerful ships getting built, powerful armies first coming into power and things like that. Well, if you skip that entirely into like the disease age, well, we'd have to make a unit that's kind of like an infantry but works like a disease carrier or something like that. I can see why they've done this, because again, they can kind of like semi-guide you and then have these different wacky units, but it isn't just fully crazy units and buildings and things. There is some known structure that's going to go through there, and they'll know, you know, exactly at this point, you're going to have these rough main units, and then we can have these alt history units that are a bit crazy around those and kind of filling out your roster, and it doesn't really matter as much as if everything was just no hold barred craziness. It would get a bit crazy, so it will be interesting to see if the game does well again. If they maybe do a mode where you can turn that off and you can just have alt history modes constantly, that would be pretty cool to play. But I'd imagine if you could always play it, it would get very kind of not boring, but just so crazy all the time. You'd probably feel lost and things like that. So I actually quite like this way of doing it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But then as they say here, you know, you are switching basically between historical and non-historical, but the past influences the present and future. So units, buildings, improvements, goods, and so on that come from these varying ages change things further down the timeline. Just because you progress out of a variant age doesn't mean it doesn't affect your realm into the future. So this is one of the questions I saw a lot during the announcement of the game, and has come up pretty much ever since is, well, if I do the Age of Steam and have like these steampunk ships and tanks, they just go away when I go into the next normal age? Well, they don't. it looks like you'll either get variants that are kind of progressing through the eras in that design, or at least you're going to be able to like upgrade them so they don't just become worthless once you hit the next age. It'd be interesting to see exactly how that plays out in game. But they are saying here, you know, buildings, improvements, goods that you get from these weird timelines are going to carry on. So, you know, it does look like they are going to be making some kind of system to make them worthwhile. Even when you get back to an historical timeline later on, you're still getting the benefit of these weird and wacky timelines that you've decided or maybe not decided to go into. And they're going to cover that in a second as well. So there you go. Research. This is how you're going to get into the different ages. So you've got the Age of Bronze here. These ages are linked together in the timeline. So there's the first one here, which is the initial age that you start in. And then the Age of Bronze, and then the Age of Iron is the next one. And as you can see, these are the different kind of technologies that you can learn. And then these things above, I believe they're the unlocks that you get. If you research community, you get these building unlocks, and you get some kind of money bonus or something like that. Obviously, we don't know what that is, but you can kind of look at this. It looks like maybe a quarry, warehouse or something, and then something else here. I can't exactly tell what they are, but that's basically how this screen works. These are the technologies, and these are the bonuses you get, or the buildings or units you get for researching these. So very much how you see in like Civilization. That is how it's going to work. Obviously, these ones look kind of standard. The alt history ones are going to look a little bit more zany. When you research a new age, you get a suite of buildings, units, improvements, and more, just like any other tech. By researching the Age of Blood, for example, you unlock the Berserker unit that's ready to lay waste to your enemies, which you will have a lot of in the Age of Blood. Oh, I wonder if they force everyone to be at war then. With it saying that, I guess it makes sense. The Age of Blood, everyone's just at war constantly, and then maybe to get out of it, you have to conquer a certain amount of people or something. That will be interesting to see how that plays out. If you're the first person to enter an age, you also lock in that age in the timeline. All other players will have to progress through the same age as you once the timeline is locked in. That makes the leading nation an important role to maintain, as you get to choose which technologies are available in your game, which we covered at the beginning of the video. That's kind of like one of the bonuses of being ahead, as they say here. You get to choose which one you want to do. That is interesting in itself, but I think it's also a little bit interesting if you're a little bit behind and you're kind of getting dragged through history in these weird time ways that you don't want to go into, but the leading nation is basically choosing to go into these historical or not options, and you're kind of getting dragged along for the ride, a little bit behind, and then trying to catch up yourself. So yeah, I think it works well either way, being in charge of it basically, or kind of catching up and trying to be in charge in the future. They chose this option. I now want to try be the most researched nation, so I can choose this one next time, and then that's going to help me more. Each age also has age rules which are enforced globally as long as the age is the leading age. Entering a new age will replace the old age rules from the previous age. We're saying age a lot in this, obviously. The historical ages have more tame age rules that reward players for following patterns in known history, like building castles in the Age of Kings. The alt history ages are where age rules become more pronounced. The age rules for the Age of Blood force every nation to be at war with every other nation. Oh well, there we go. That's what we just guessed might be the case, and it is the case. But it also reduces the penalty associated for being at war, so you're always at war. It's less kind of burdensome to your realm to be so. These age rules can make each age more impactful than just the technologies available. So you might want to pick up an age just because you can leverage the age rules in your favor. So yeah, there might be somewhere like, I don't really want these buildings or units. These age rules are really in my favor. I guess specifically the Age of Blood, you might not necessarily want to go into the Age of Blood, but if you're so far ahead, maybe you're doing really well building a military up and you're like, look, I can take on everyone else, so I'm going to do this so that I'm always at war, and it's also going to affect my realm less. So although I don't want these Berserker units, I don't want whatever special buildings the Age of Blood brings, I want to always be at war because I can like conquer the world basically without any kind of a slowdown on having to declare war, have truces and all that. You could just constantly be at war and just go nuts on the map and win. So that is a cool thing they're calling out. You might not necessarily want the age techs and units and buildings. You might just want the special rules that are in place during that age to benefit your realm to the most it can. So what are the types of ages? Obviously, they've been talking about ages, how they work. Well, what are the actual ages themselves? So as I mentioned above, historical ages don't have any additional requirements beyond the minimum tech requirement, and they tend to have more subtle age rules, as I just said. These follow a traditional historical route that will be familiar. There's plenty to do if you stay on the known path. There are fine strategies that involve trying to progress through the standard age timeline, but you'll miss some of the fun of the alternate ages. So if you just want to play vanilla kind of, I just want to play this game with like known history and things like that. You can just do that, no punishment to you. You can play it out and just have a good time. Varying ages, these are the primary place for what-if scenarios. These have special requirements to unlock, but you might meet those by accident because of your playstyle, or you might decide to go out your way to steer into a variant. Varying ages tend to be somewhat equivalent to historical ages, except their what-if scenario blends the game, making it play differently. Your nation is booming in the Age of Iron. It might be wise to push for the Age of Monuments next instead of the Age of Kings, as Monuments offers unique improvements that can help your regions grow. So some of them aren't like uber crazy, you know, like the Age of Steam and things like that. Some are just focusing on something more than something else. So I think Age of Monuments is where you can build loads of wonders of the world and things like that, whereas Age of Kings is more, I think, historical kind of shenanigans, basically. So they aren't all crazy. Some of them are just like different choices, different focuses on your realm, well, on the world, I suppose, as everyone's in it, rather than some crazy alternate technology age. Some of them are just different focuses, as you can see here. And then Crisis Ages, these are similar to variants. They have unique units, buildings, and other content to help you progress. They also generally come with some disaster that will challenge every nation in the game. This isn't always bad. If you're well suited to overcome the challenge, you might want to go into a crisis just to make the other nations suffer, or you might want to go into a crisis age for a unit or tech that you couldn't get otherwise. Again, these different ways you might want to go into these crisis ages, because as I said before with the earlier example, if your army's doing really well, I'm going to go into the Age of Blood and I'm just going to go crazy on the map because I can afford to fight everyone and everyone else can't. And it's just easier for me rather than having to do, you know, diplomacy and things like that. I could just go in and smash everyone. And then obviously these other ones, which we're not going to get exactly a breakdown this Dev Diary. I imagine the next one maybe they're going to go over these alt history ones, all the different options there are. It's cool to see there are these different ways you can play them out. Not necessarily like, oh, I just want to have Steam power be kind of primary for a while. There are actually these other reasons why you might want to, or you might want to avoid it if you don't want to do that. Another difference in Crisis Ages is that you are locked out of another age option when you meet their requirements. You don't necessarily have to enter the Crisis Age at that point if you don't want to. You could instead continue to research technologies and bide your time, hoping that another nation researches a different age and sets the timeline to something else. Interesting, you can actually meet the requirements for these Crisis Ages, but not like click the button and activate it as an age. I think some of them, I'm sure they mentioned in one of the previous Dev Diaries, some of them do. I'm sure it was mentioned before where some of the like Crisis Age or like the like the Age of Poisons or whatever it was called, like the disease one. I'm sure that one mentioned if you have cities that aren't well sanitized and things like that, you would gradually fall into that age. And I don't think you could just ignore it. I'm pretty sure it just triggered in the end and would plunge everyone into that. But it does look like at least some of them, you can hit the requirements for a Crisis Age and just not activate it, thinking like, well, I can research a different one that I actually want, or I'll trust that another nation is going to do that research, get another age that I do want, they'll activate that one, and then the one I have that I don't want will just get forgotten about. Again, different ways you can do it. You can get all the requirements and then go, well, actually, I don't want to go into this one. In fact, I want to keep out of the Age of Plague, so I'm not going to press the button on it. I'm going to wait for someone else to hopefully do it. But I guess if no one does, you're like, well, I've got to progress the age in the end. So I'm just going to bite the bullet and do it and just see what happens. And as you can see here, yeah, Age of Plague was the name of it. I thought it was. This person here is in the Age of Plagues, and as you can see, some bad stuff going down on the map. There's a lot of poisons and things like that going on. And obviously they're going to probably try get through this as quick as they can. Although maybe they've set up their nation to support it well. Who knows? So, you know, they are saying some of the ages you might want to be in, some you might want to get through as quick as you can and get to the other side into something a bit more preferable. Hopefully we will get a breakdown of exactly how these work in a future Dev Diary. I think they have been doing some like YouTube shorts on their YouTube channel, which do go through these different ages, but having some like full breakdowns will be cool. And I'm sure they'll be coming up before too long to kind of give us that information before launch, obviously. And then the last type is Victory Ages. These have a high bar to meet, but if you can manage it, you gain the ability to win the game. The most common victory ages are the age 10 victories. Every age 10 option is a victory age because there are 10 ages in the game. So the last ones, that's how you win the game, basically. There are also some victory ages available earlier in the game. These are what they are called internally off-ramp victory ages. They did mention this, I think, in the second or third Dev Diary. These were put into place to make you feel like if you're so far ahead, you can just end the game. You don't have to sit there like we've all done in like Civ, where you're like, well, I know I'm going to win, but I've basically just got to sit there and play through like 100 more turns. Let's get that last bit of culture that I need. defeat that one last nation that I need to defeat to get a domination victory. Well, these victory ages, if you're hitting the requirements, you can activate one and then try fulfill, the active requirements and then just win the game early. You're so far ahead. Or, as they mentioned here, you've got to be careful entering a victory age because, as with the early ones, everyone enters the victory age. So these are just a set of specific rules for winning. Anyone who meets the requirements will win. Don't rest on your laurels just yet. So yeah, you could be really far ahead. You could think, well, I'm just going to activate this Age of Victory in Age 6 and I'm going to win. But then someone else secretly has, I don't know, been stockpiling what they think they need for this. You turn on the Age of Victory, you think you're going to win, and they just come out of nowhere and steal the victory from you. So I imagine against the AI, you're probably not going to see that as much, but I imagine multiplayer games are going to be really cool with people thinking, look, I'm so far behind, but I know they're probably going to activate this victory age, so I'm going to stockpile everything I need, and then as soon as that lead player activates it, they just go ham, just do everything they can. They've been hiding in the shadows, and they're going to try and come out and win at the end. Pretty cool it works this way. It isn't just a victory age for you. Activates for everyone, and then everyone gets the chance to hit those requirements. Obviously, I think in most of the games, you're going to be so far ahead, it's just going to be you that wins. There is that little bit of risk reward, I guess. If you're like, I'm a little bit ahead, I'm going to roll the dice and risk it. And you could obviously fail and lose your game entirely because you went for it and tried to do this victory age. Again, I like how they've done these ages. They're not just simple things. There are different ways they can play out, different ways you might want to play them out. All that good stuff. And then the last bit of the dev diary here, we're not actually going to go through this. This is basically talking about the dev here basically has played the game a lot, obviously, making the game, they played the game a lot. They're just talking about the different historical ages and generally how they play them when they're playing the game. So it'd be a little bit weird me talking through it because I've not played the game. It'd be a little bit weird for me to just talk through it when I'm not obviously 100% sure how they fit together and everything like that, but it is interesting to read through. There is some interesting information about little bonuses you get and things like that. I think there's one down here like the Renaissance, you get an Explorer unit and these different other bonuses that you get. The Age of Kings, you can upgrade outposts to castles. It's a little bit of a cool, not an AAR, basically telling you how they pick the ages generally, what they do in them, and the kind of little bits of bonuses and focus that you can have in these different ages. If you are interested, I'll leave a link to it in the description as always, and you can read through it. But these are the historical ages. So we have the Age of Stone, the Age of Bronze, the Age of Iron, the Age of Kings, Age of the Renaissance, the Age of the Enlightenment, the Age of Revolution, Age of the Atom, and then the Information Age is the last one. That's obviously where you can go pretty crazy. Victory Age is the Age of the Singularity. The Age of Information is basically the last step. You do your best to win the game at that point. If you've made it all the way there, you can decide how you're going to win and all that cool stuff. So, like I say, kind of interesting to read through, but we're not going to do it on this video. It's been long enough as it is, and it's not really game information, but it is cool to kind of read through. It gives you a rough idea of how these ages play out and things like that. And there we go. That's the end of the dev diary. They're basically signing off and saying part 2. Obviously, there's going to be a bunch more information about the ages. I imagine the ahistorical ones will get a lot more information about. They haven't covered them in a great amount of detail in this dev diary, so I would imagine those and maybe these victory ages at the end will also get some information about. But there we go. That's the end of the dev diary. They do come about every 2 or 3 weeks. So as always, if you've enjoyed today's video, hit that like button. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. I cover historical strategy games. I cover obviously dev diaries, news, discussion videos. We do campaigns, achievement runs, do live streams, doing cool little challenges and things like that as well. So subscribe if you've enjoyed your time here today, but I'll see you in the next one.